This is Bobby McFarland with my video observation journal number 3 for Introduction to Autism with Brandman University. Today I want to talk about some of the behavioral characteristics that I've noticed working with students on the autism spectrum. And then talk about some interventions I've seen used with these students and kind of discuss how I saw them working. The first one I want to talk about that I have noticed the most is repetitive movements. One student comes to mind who had a lot of flapping movements and head tilting, and she would actually tilt her head back for 10 to 15 seconds at a time. It was a little bit disturbing at first, but working with her behavior specialist as her case manager, we worked together, and the intervention that they saw working and that we would do working with her was to simply stop contact with her and look the other way, not make eye contact. And she would definitely try to make eye contact. And so it did look like she was looking for attention doing that. Part of me was thinking that maybe it was during something that she didn't want to do, and so she knew that if she did that we would stop contact and stop working with her. So I was wondering maybe if she was starting to realize that, but we continued doing that, and they did say it had been working. They were tracking data, so that was what we did for that one. Another behavioral characteristic that I have noticed is attachment and obsession with unusual things. I had a student in 9th grade who was really into trains. He loved talking about it, showing pictures, and I loved talking to him about it because he was really, really interested in it. But the only time it became a problem was when he would talk about it at inappropriate times during class, interrupting other students, teachers. So what I would do is after class or during class, I would give him a quick nudge and remind him that we can talk about it later, or to hold on to his thought, and that something else is going on that he needed to focus on. And that I did see that working. I did see a decrease in that behavior. The next one that I have noticed is a strong need for order and routines. This brings to mind a student who was the same student who was really into the trains, and we worked together after school every day at the same time and in the same classroom. And one day I had to move our classroom or change our room because of construction, and before school I showed him where the room was and I let him know that we would be in a different room that day. And when I went to the room, he wasn't there after school, so I went back and saw him wandering around the hallway outside of our usual room. And so I said, "Do you remember what I told you earlier?" And he said no, and so I reminded him that I did tell him we would be in a new room. And when we started walking there, he said, "Oh yeah," and he remembered. So I think he was so stuck in that routine, and he wanted to be in that room so bad because that was our room, that he was just out there looking for me. So very sweet student, but it was kind of just reminding him and then letting him know that sometimes the rooms change, and that's part of the way that school works and life will work. Things change, and you need to kind of stay on top of things changing. The next behavioral characteristics that I noticed, clumsiness, poor posture, and odd movements. This reminds me of my student who was lower functioning, and she would walk hunched over and then also lean a little bit while walking. And she had adaptive PE. It was amazing to watch the teacher work with her. They did so many stamina exercises, and she had her out there running and different little tricks to kind of help with her posture and her movements. So we did see that working very well for her and improved fitness. Sensitivity to sensory input, resulting in under or overreactive behaviors. This one reminds me of a student who we're having a pep rally, and it was very loud. I can even understand how those things can be overwhelming, any big event like that in a small room. And we did want her to be in the room and participate, but it was clear that she was overwhelmed, and at one point she actually left the room, ran out of the room, didn't say anything, but it was very dramatic. You could tell she was overwhelmed, and she ended up sitting on the floor, kind of hunched over, grabbing her knees, and I sat with her. I tried to talk to her, and she tried to walk away. She didn't want anyone talking to her, which I understood, and so I went over and I said, I'm not gonna talk, we can just sit here until you're ready to talk. And we were there for about 20 minutes, and she started talking and was willing to talk about it. So that's something I wasn't sure if it would work, but I tried it out. Just wanted to be there for her without having any more, without anything else overwhelming her, and that did work. So my biggest takeaway from this is, you know, I have researched some research-based interventions, and I do know about them. These weren't all necessarily very calculated and planned and taking data, but I went with my gut and what I've learned from other teachers and research, and all of these did work very well for me. But I am looking forward to really learning how to take data and use those interventions to really help a lot of students and help them in the long run.